This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, or so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. Welcome back to the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with your host, David Charlton. I hope you're well, and I hope your week has been a good one so far. Certainly for me, I'm feeling a lot better, more refreshed after having a week off recently. And also, the light nights are here now. The weather's getting a little bit warmer here in sunny or not so sunny Newcastle upon Tyne. Spending a little bit more time on the golf course. So all in all, things are on the up. So this week, I'm going to be looking at a solo episode. It's going to be part one of a two-part series where we're going to be talking about the important topic of being released from a football club. And although I mentioned the word football club there, this does apply to other sports, be it cricket, rugby, gymnastics, any sport out there where you can be cut or cast aside, released by clubs or organisations. So this is a podcast episode which I think is going to help coaches and help them understand what players actually go through during these situations. It's going to help the players themselves and also the parents of players too. The likelihood is the players in question that are going to be released could be youngsters in academies, or they could be adults who are aged 18 plus and into their 20s and into their 30s. We could be talking about motivated amateurs here, motivated youngsters through to the professional game. And how I'm going to approach this, part one is an episode where I'm going to discuss 4 key elements to mental toughness. And I'm going to give you, the listener, some advice on how a mentally tough person would deal with this predicament, this situation. And I'm also going to arm you with some tools so that you can develop your own mental toughness or the players or your children's mental toughness. So as I said, I'm going to touch on 4 elements. So let's go now with number 1. And this is linked to emotional control. So my advice is try to keep the situation that you're in proportion. Yes, I understand you're going to be heavily invested in your sport. You're going to be frustrated. You might be annoyed. You might have a range of emotions. You might be up, you might be down, feeling really stressed out and worried about the future. Now, the mentally tough person will look to channel their emotions in the right way, which is really going to help them go on to achieve what it is that they want to achieve. And yes, being released, it's going to hurt. It could hurt for a while. So the key is, how can you channel your emotions? The first thing I'd say is being able to discuss your thoughts, being able to discuss your feelings with a close friend, or someone impartial like myself, a psychologist or a coach. The skill from the other person is simply listening to you, letting you offload, letting you vent your frustration, getting things out of your head. And it might not be pleasant for you. There might be tears, and you might be very, very tired after this type of experience. The emotional impact might not be pleasant for a period. However, just simply getting those feelings, getting those thoughts out of your head, talking about them can reduce that burden and take away some of the shock that you've experienced through this situation. Now, point 2 is linked to the challenge element of mental toughness, and this is learning orientation. And my key message here is the mentally tough person will view this type of situation as a setback, yes, but also as an opportunity to develop themselves. However, let's be honest, this is likely to be very, very difficult when you're in that situation, when your emotions are all over the place, when you've been so invested in your sport and you've had a big shock. The likelihood is that you're going to be feeling pretty stuck. You might be very, very helpless and down in the dumps. So I'm hoping this exercise is going to try and pull you out of this. We're going to assume that you've had an initial conversation with someone, as I alluded to before, that you have offloaded. And the next thing would be, I'd like you to consider You could maybe even write this down if you wish. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is that decision that you've been released to you right now? And it might be a 9 or a 10 or a 7, because you are feeling pretty rubbish and are frustrated about the situation. You are emotional. But what I'd like you to do now is to write down a very similar question, and on a scale of 1 to 10, how important will that decision be in 12 months' time? So if you think about it, a year down the line, the emotions that have come with this experience that you're experiencing right now, they're going to be very different in 12 months' time. You might, yes, be able to picture being released. You might be able to see yourself being frustrated, annoyed. You might see and be able to visualize the conversations that took place with the coaching staff. And it likely won't be a pleasant thing to actually visualize. However, what you're likely to find is that the emotion will have subsided. It will have swelled down over that 12-month period. You've done things to pass the time to actually improve, hopefully. And on that scale of 1 to 10, I would like to think that decision would be down to a 2, a 3, a 4, might even be less than that. Again, if you think about it, if you actually have used your time wisely during that 12 months, you might, and I'd like to think you would become a better person and a better player because of the way you've handled the situation. So as I mentioned earlier, this point is about seeing this setback as an opportunity to develop yourself. It's about finding a way to deal with this situation better. So what is it that you're actually going to learn from this situation? That's the really important part about this. You know, you can see this as a challenge, or you can bury your head in the sand. So I'm going to try and help you make a sense of what it is that you've been through, or help your players see sense in what they've been through. I'm going to try and help you see if the feedback that you've actually received from the coaching staff is true or not, so that perhaps you can challenge it if necessary. It's going to help you connect the dots ultimately that have actually happened in this situation, so you can get a really balanced point of view. And how we're going to do that? Well, there's going to be a handout in the show notes which link to this. And if we go back probably about 100 podcasts earlier, it is something I've talked about in the past. We've got Gibbs's reflective cycle. This is a process. It's a learning process, if you like, which is really, really helpful. It has 6 steps in there which can really help you make sense of this situation. So we'll begin. We've got description. Basically, what you need to do now is just write down what it is that actually happened. You know, you've been released, and it might have been done well. It might have been done in a not so nice manner. You might be feeling terrible about the whole situation, or you might be just plain angry about it, which links to the next part, the feelings part. What is it that you're thinking and feeling about this? That's right, write it down. Maybe you are feeling angry. Maybe you are feeling frustrated. You might be feeling that it's not fair. You might be worried about the future. Or you might even be annoyed with yourself. You realize you haven't done yourself justice. The third step is you've got evaluation. What actually is good and bad about this experience? Did you take feedback well or not? Did you feel it was justified? Have what the club have offered you in the last 12 months or so improved you as a player, improved you as a person? There's so many different avenues you can go down when you look at the good and the bad about the experience. Then we've got analysis. What sense can you make from this situation? And, you know, you might well be processing things unconsciously at this point. You've really got to be honest with yourself. Perhaps, you know, you've been distracted at some points, or you've let fears take over. Maybe your motivation hasn't been where it should have been. Write it down. Make some sense of this situation. And then the last thing you've got is the conclusion. What else could I have done? It might have been that you could have put extra training in, or that you could have listened to coaches more. Maybe you could have bonded with the team. And then the important factor now is, And is actually the last thing is the action plan. So if this situation arose again, what would you do? You never know. Next season, you might be playing for a different club. And again, you might be released. It happens an awful lot in football and in other sports where players move from club to club. So what is it that you would do in that situation again? This is going to help mentally prepare yourself. And as I said earlier, it is really key that you take the learning from this situation. And in this process, Gibbs's reflective cycle there is in the show notes should you want to be able to actually visualize it and see this tool. It's really going to help add some leverage to what it is that you're trying to achieve. And it's also going to add some leverage to the first point where you've actually discussed and you've got things off your chest. So go on. I encourage you, be honest with yourself and really seek to take the learning away. And now we've got point 3, which links to life control, another element of mental toughness. And ultimately what we're looking at here is, what is it that you need to do to find a way to deal with this situation the best way possible? And I've got an exercise again, which can really help you there. If you are emotional, if you're finding this difficult, if you found the previous 2 exercises difficult, this can just add another layer. Often we can make decisions out of fear. We can be very helpless and feel trapped. And this exercise can really tap into the subconscious parts of our brain. It may feel a little bit like a repetitive exercise. The questions are very, very simple, but simply by following through and following this process and spending 5 or 10 minutes working through these 4 questions, it really will help. Often when we are feeling helpless, we can find it quite difficult to make decisions. But this is really going to help you go to a higher level of thinking and get some clarity on your situation. So I'm going to quit the waffling on. What I'd like you to do, again, there's going to be a handout for this, but if you've got a bit of paper handy now, you could draw a table where it's got 2 columns and 2 rows. And in the top left box, shall we say, your job now is to write down what would happen if I did such and such. And then in the top right-hand box, you could write down what would happen if I didn't do such and such. And then in the top right box, you're going to write down what wouldn't happen if I did such and such. Then we're going to go to the bottom left-hand box and you're going to write down what would happen if I didn't do such and such. And then lastly, and maybe you're following this or maybe not, the bottom right-hand box is going to read what wouldn't happen if I didn't do such and such. So as I said, this exercise may feel a little bit repetitive, but it is a really, really powerful exercise. It helps you really pull out the pros and the cons in your mind. Unconsciously, it can make such a huge difference following this process. When I'm working with clients, you can see some of the light bulb moments from just spending 5-10 minutes doing this. And it's great to see. It really is. It helps hand over an element of control to the client. So yeah, I encourage you to do this. It can help you really provide yourself with a more positive outlook going forwards. So now for the last one, number 4. And this links to risk orientation, which again falls under the challenge bracket. And the takeaway here is the mentally tough person is likely to accept that there are better ways of doing things moving forwards and that they are open to exploring different options. Now, again, this can be tricky if you've been released from a club and you are emotional. But I'm hoping if you have worked your way through some of these exercises, you've taken the advice on board, that you are beginning to feel that you do have a sense of control over the situation going forward. So now I'd say we're getting towards goal setting time. How is it that you're going to go about your business moving forwards? So the first thing you want to do really is look to review your goals. consider what your goals have been for the last 12 months. Really take a step back. Maybe you wanted to be a Premiership footballer, a Premier League footballer, or you wanted to play in League 2 or League 1, or simply get a regular game for your age group side. What was it? And then sit back and have a little think about this goal and how important it was to you. Consider the resources that you had at your disposal, the tools, the skills that you developed along the way. Consider the mental side. That's right, the psychological side of the sport, the physical side, the fitness. And then think about the next 12 months and the resources that you've got available to yourself, some of the skills that you need to develop, be that technical, tactical, physical, psychological. Just have a little bit of a think about that. So yeah, I hope you found this episode useful. As I say, I've looked at 4 different elements of mental toughness there. We've shared some different ideas and resources, and some of these resources will be in the show notes. If you're someone who's listening to this and you've gone through a recent release, or you know someone who has been released by a club, my heart does go out to you. And I can appreciate that it could well be a difficult time for you. However, I'd also say, there is help out there for people. Certainly in our business, we've got a team here of sports psychologists who are trained and are in training, who are very good at what they do and can help you. And likewise, there are many other professionals around the country and in different countries that again can help you. So to wrap this up, I'm just going to remind you though of the 4 things that can really help you in this type of situation. So firstly, we've got, try and keep the situation in proportion. Secondly, attempt to see this challenge, this situation as an opportunity to develop yourself. And thirdly, we've got find a way to deal with this situation. And then lastly, accept that there might be better ways of doing things and be open to exploring moving forwards. So I sincerely hope that you found this helpful. Next week, you're going to see a part 2 of this episode where again, I'm going to share 4 other tips which link to the mental toughness framework. If you'd like to get in touch to have a chat about this, or if you just want to send me a message via social media, feel free to do so. You could also reach out by joining the Sports Psychology Hub, a Facebook group, which is pretty busy, which I run. Take care, and I look forward to sharing more insights next week. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sports psychology resources. The Sport-Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.